Amazing team that did again. A many story you have today?
Many. Oh, we've got about 6 or 7 stories today.
Wow, that's
We got a
impressive.
packed program.
Right. Congratulations to Laura and all her team friend, because we are a family. Thank you very much. Okay, enjoy the day. I will stay with you.
Thank you, Marco. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Welcome, everyone. So happy to have you here today for the Tell Us Your Story final culminating program of this semester's course. All right, so I will tell you a little bit about me. I'll tell you a little bit about the course. And I'll tell you a little bit about Holiday Park. As I know a lot of you already know about Holiday Park, but I want to give them a shout out for all that they do. The Tell Us Your Story program, we have just completed an 8-week semester of the Tell Us Your Story program. It's a pretty rigorous program. I will tell you, these writers really busted their chops. They came to class every week, they showed up, they did the writing exercises in classes. They gave each other critiques that were generous, thoughtful, and kind, but also helpful. So if they were listening to a story and there was a question that they had or something that they didn't understand, they would ask a question, and that would help the writers to go back and rewrite their pieces in a way that would answer those questions. So you'll get to hear a lot of that when you hear these wonderful stories today. They worked on outlining, on how to use a story prompt, such as they brought in photographs of someone significant in their lives and wrote stories about that person. They learned how to build dramatic tension, one of the things that you'll get to witness and hear in their stories. They learned how to develop characters, to use descriptive details, to use dialogue to enrich their story. They learned, as I said, how to give feedback. They worked not only in class, but they worked from home. They went back and forth with me, tightening their story. So that process of having a story edited can really be a challenging one, because you've put your heart and soul into a beautiful piece of storytelling, and now you're going to have me, an editor, take it and say, go back and tweak this a little. Consider changing this. And that is not an easy process, to go back and forth with someone. And they did so, as I said, I like to use the term bravely. They were very brave in their work, and you will hear that as you hear their stories. To tell you a little bit about myself, I'm Laura Sturza. I was born and raised in Montgomery County, and I am a writer and a writing teacher. I also incorporate a little bit of yoga and meditation into the classes, as my students will attest. And I have had my work published in Washington Post and the Baltimore Sun and Boston Globe, a bunch of other publications. I'm also working on a memoir about getting married after 50 for the first time, and my husband Tom is here recording us, so I'm thrilled to have him here and always have his support. And I love that several of the readers today brought friends and family to come and celebrate the work that their family members have done. I want to tell you a little bit about the presenter, Holiday Park. Many of you are familiar with Holiday Park, but I really love to give a shout out to the amazing community that is built by the folks that run Holiday Park. It is, they serve about 300 over 55 adults every single day. They've got people coming in here and out of here through social and enrichment programs, literature, writing classes, discussion groups, card and board games, a dance club, special interest seminars, classes offered throughout the day, drop-in activities. It is an amazing place. If you are not taking full advantage of the center and you are over 55, or you have friends who are over 55, I hope you will tell them about it. You can tell I love this place. I myself take class here. My husband takes a class here. We just think, and it costs very, very little. Some classes are free, some cost a very modest amount. And I especially want to give a shout out to the folks that funded this class. So this class doesn't come about for free. I am very grateful that the Tell Us Your Story program is supported in part by funding from the Montgomery County government and the Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County, and is co-sponsored by the Montgomery County Recreation Department. So I really want to, if we could just give a hand for the folks that allowed us to offer this class to the community at no charge. Pretty awesome. Okay, so with that, I think we'll go ahead and let me see if I have any other things on my little script. Okay. I do want to say one other thing as you're listening to the writers tell their stories, that part of the goal of having you all here today is not just to celebrate their work, but hopefully to inspire you to go home and do some of your own storytelling and your own writing. And so that is part of the goal of today's event. And for those who wish to, I know you were carefully checked in at the door, but there's also a sign-up sheet here. And the goal of that sign-up sheet is that there are two things. One is that all the stories you're going to hear today are in this magazine, which we can't afford to print out copies for everyone, but I can email you an electronic version so you can have one of the copies for yourself. And all of our students will receive that as well to distribute to their friends. So if you'd like a copy of that, or if you would like to participate in this class next year when we offer it again in the spring, then sign up over there. And then you'll get an email from me right before the class starts saying, sign up now, or tell your friends to sign up now. So with that, I would like to introduce Alice. You're going to be our first reader today. And Alice Adams is a native Washingtonian who has lived in Montgomery County for more than 25 years. She was a practicing physician for over 35 years. She earned her MD and a doctorate in physiology from Howard University College of Medicine. And she is the proud mother of a daughter who is also a Howard Med School grad. Alice enjoys theater, music, dance, and memoir writing. She and her daughter also like to travel and talk shop, as both are neurologists. And with that, I'd like to present Alice Adams reading her story, Becoming a Doctor.
My mentor, Dr. Woodley Don, trained me to be a good neurologist. He was a strong man, not especially large in stature, but truly larger than life in many ways. I was handpicked to be a neurology resident by Dr. Don. He knew something of my background, a PhD in neurophysiology, and a good student, top 10 in my medical class. It didn't take me long to decide that I wanted to be just like Dr. Don. In many ways, I think I filled the bill. I believe that he was proud of me and my accomplishments, most of all, my performance as a neurologist, a doctor, and a human being. Many times he was too strong, and I did not feel quite up to his standards. Dr. Don was a towering figure, well known at our hospital. He instilled fear in all of his medical residents, colleagues, and staff due to his no-nonsense temperament. When he made rounds and asked questions of students and residents, they were terrified. Even if the answer to the question was known, the emotional state produced would prevent a correct response. I became the neurology resident, always trying to live up to these standards. A patient encounter. A 34-year-old lady was presented to our emergency room, having become unresponsive following the complaint of a severe headache. She had a massive subarachnoid hemorrhage that's bleeding into the brain and was essentially brain dead on arrival to our emergency room. She had 3 young children, ages 4, 7, and 9. After evaluating the patient and determining that she was indeed brain dead, Dr. Don and I approached the family in the intensive care waiting room. It was not my first time as the bearer of bad news, and I accompanied him. Family members, including the children, waited anxiously. Dr. Don explained to them what had occurred and told them that the patient was clinically brain dead.
I'm sorry.
Personally, I thought him a little abrupt, but this was his manner in general. However, when one has that kind of news, there's really no way to soften the blow. Right away, the young children, after comprehending, were distraught with grief. They cried, "My mommy, she's not coming home." They cried and cried. They fell to the floor. I wanted to grab them, hug them, take away their pain, but I could not. I felt a tremendous sense of empathy as a parent of young children myself. I placed my hands behind my back and I squeezed my arms tightly. I tried to keep myself together. After all, it would not be appropriate for the doctor to cry. I managed to stand next to my mentor and be supportive of the diagnosis and, unfortunately, the prognosis. I knew that he would have expected no less from me, nor would I give any less. Following the encounter, I walked quickly in the direction of the on-call room, tears welling up in my eyes, losing it quickly. But that was okay because Dr. Don was going to his office and I could go to the on-call room and cry my eyes out. Oh no, I thought when I heard his strong voice call me, "Dr. Adams, make sure that you do this." I had to turn and look at him, and he saw that I was crying. He ignored my emotions. However, I felt awful, weak, sorry that he saw that I was crying. This was so typical of a woman and not men doctors. Men had always dominated the field of medicine for a very long time. I guess they were always self-controlled and devoid of emotion. They just did not cry. I will never forget that experience. It occurred early in my career, yet unfortunately was a rather common occurrence, especially in my field of medicine. I toughened up, yet I did often feel sad and occasionally cry at the loss of life. It is expected that doctors are supposed to be strong and able to handle many difficult events. Even with my acquired strength, I realized that I was a human being who could not escape having strong feelings when losing a patient. A rather important discovery to be made as a doctor.
Congratulations, Alice. Thank you. Thank you for your beautiful story. All right, friends. Next up, I would like to introduce John Lascalzo. He and his loving wife, Jeanette, who is deceased, raised 5 children. After engineering school, John worked for the Navy Bureau of Ships Machine Design Division in Washington, D.C. Later, he worked for the Atomic Energy Commission in the Maritime and Space Nuclear Power branches. He became the branch chief for the Civilian Reactor Technology Division's nuclear facilities at the Idaho and Washington laboratories. Though the Dodgers relocated to Los Angeles, he will always be a Brooklyn Dodgers fan. And now, reading his story, Our Kitchen, Memories of When I Was Young, I give you John Lascalzo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Tough act to follow, but it's from a doctor. From 1940 to late 1951, my family of 6 grew up in an apartment house. We lived in an apartment in Brooklyn, New York. My Aunt Millie and her son and my mother's parents also lived with us for a while during that time. We spent most of our time in the kitchen. Can you hear me now? Thank you. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. You had to go through the kitchen to reach the front 2 bedrooms and the living room, and on a different side to reach the back 2 bedrooms, the bathroom, and the clothesline, which was attached to a building on the other side of the alley. The apartment's entrance was also in the kitchen. That was a busy place, let me tell you. Now here comes the problem. With between 6 and 8 people living in a 4-room apartment, washing our clothes was not a fun chore. It had to be done in the kitchen. Monday was wash day, which started early and usually took until mid-afternoon to complete. Our washing machine was too large for the space available. It was kept in a corner of the kitchen and rolled over to be closer to the sink, which provided the water that ran through the wash. The wall behind the sink was tiled, which saved the wall from splashing water that emptied back into the sink. When the washing was over, the related mess was cleaned up, and believe me, it was a mess. We were happy to again enjoy the kitchen space. We lived in a neighborhood that was primarily Italian and Jewish. My grandparents were among the folks with Italian roots. Everyone got along. The grandmother, who lived with us for a while, was very firm and serious due to some rather hardships. Since she knew me, and that I did not study adequately time, she made sure to let me know. She was right. This came to a head when my friend Marvin and I came from the outside. We were hot, sweaty, and thirsty for a drink from playing handball. We wanted to cool off and get a drink. Turn this around. Of water. My grandmother greeted us by saying, "Why aren't you studying like the other Jewish boys do?" Marvin answered politely, using the Italian name that he often used respectively for older parents. He said, "Signora, I am Jewish, but I like playing ball." She just shook her head and did not say anything else after that. Our family Sunday dinners were a special event for us when we enjoyed being with each other and eating tasty food. When my grandmother cooked, the Sunday dinners were not only extra delicious, they were also the food's aroma that spread throughout the kitchen. The dinner consisted of spaghetti covered with tomato sauce that was strongly seasoned with basil and garlic, freshly ground Parmesan cheese, delicately fried meatballs and sausages, cooked at a low temperature and regularly rolled over to avoid overcooking any side of the meat. My grandmother's cooking was a work of art. When I asked a question on how the cooking was going, she discussed what was involved in buying the food for dinner. This was an education. The tomatoes had to be fresh and ripe. involved and she was not canned. The sausage color had to be fresh looking. She watched the butcher put the solid chunk of meat on the grinder, which had to be empty of any other meat. She probably did not want someone else's meat in her meatballs. When I was shopping with my mom, she did the same thing at the butcher's. Believe me, it was an experience just being there. We would not start eating till my grandmother would sit down with us and say, "Enjoy," with a smile. To this day, no Italian dinner has tasted better to me, honestly.
Congratulations, John. Thank you. I told you I had some great storytellers. All right, friends. Let's see. Oh, I should have mentioned we've lucked out that nobody's phone went off yet, but if you haven't turned your ringer off, please turn that ringer off for us. Next, I'd like to introduce Cora de la Santa. She is a Filipino-American born the middle of 5 children. She came to America in the mid-90s. While raising her daughter, she did many jobs. She pushed grocery carts for Safeway, sold shoes at Wheaton Plaza, and shuffled documents for an invention company. She went on to graduate school, became an MCPS substitute teacher, and she published her first book this year. You can see her afterwards about it. It's called The Other Ladies of Georgetown, about the Filipino maids of Georgetown. And with that, I give you Cora de la Santa reading her story, Filipino Cooking.
Thank you everyone for coming in. This is exciting. I'd like to thank Laura for exposing us to different topics. And also I'd like to thank my classmates who came from various disciplines and their life experiences with me. So let me continue the talk and something about cooking and kitchen. Filipino cooking. I grew up in a household with 2 kitchens. The first one was in the main house, while the second one is on the ground floor at the back of the property against the firewall. The kitchen in the main house was meant for light cooking, like boiling eggs, oatmeal, toasting bread, and other breakfast delights. It was, however, the second kitchen, known as the dirty kitchen, that bore the brunt of any cooking my family needed in the 50s and 60s. It was in the dirty kitchen that I witnessed pots of overflowing, succulent boiled beef bones, pork, and chicken. Depending on the juice of the meat, the pot would then be flavored with tamarind or calamansi, lemon, and then dumped with bok choy, root crops, and ginger were added. This particular stew, named sinigang, referred to in English as sour stew. It could sometimes be so sour, clearing your throat almost to a scream that you won't need a flu shot in the coming season. Of course, everything in our stew can be tamed, mild, medium, and strong. Why we have this soup all the time remained a puzzle to me. It could be my mother's version of the present-day one-pot meals. I also overheard in the farm workers talking when I visited my mother's farm. They believed that it was good for lactating mothers. Our dirty kitchen also was the place where we did all the frying Filipinos love to do. Remember the spring rolls? That's all fried. There was no worry about splattering oil coming from chicken, sun-dried fish, homemade sausages, and fried rice. But seriously, this was all big-time cholesterol and not for the faint of heart. Dinner time was about togetherness. If we were going to make it to dinner, we have to give a valid reason for missing it, such as getting stuck in the traffic. My siblings and I were always careful about what we talk about during dinner. School happenings were always a safe topic, but not a boy or a girl we like. Sports were, of course, another safe one. Boxing and basketball were all that we know growing up. My father, on the other hand, loved to talk about the news, including the obituary page of the newspaper. Could it be because he reads the news from the front page all the way to the last page? But whatever my father's ways had been, I kept the practice of being together during dinner when my daughter was growing up. I also developed a love for reading, except for the obituaries. I find them grim, though my father felt it was important to read them to express sympathy to families who lost a loved one. When I arrived in America in 1992, I dreamed that one day I will be able to prepare a Thanksgiving spread with slow-cooked turkey, with gravy, all kinds of pies, even the store-bought ones, pressed baked bread, cranberry sauce that is not from the can, mashed potatoes, Martha Stewart style, buttery sweet yums, the way my mother made them. I made a simpler version of what seems like an elaborate American Thanksgiving meals when my daughter was growing up. After she went to college, I enjoyed being invited to people's homes who shared a combination of Filipino and American meals, such as fried fish in place of turkey. Nonetheless, these were delightful meals that combined traditions from both of my countries. Thank you very much.
So one thing that I didn't tell you, but you're probably already figuring out, is that we also did a lot of reading aloud in class, and you can see the natural dramatic flair that everyone is bringing to their storytelling is part of what we practice and what these students excel at presenting. We have one of our writers who I'm privileged that she asked me to read her story. I'll introduce her at the end, so I'm going to read her story, and I will give you her bio first. Before retiring, Rosalind Feldman worked as a licensed psychotherapist at the Regional Institute for Children and Adolescents in Rockville, Maryland. Prior to that, she was an assistant professor of community health nursing at Catholic University and then at Georgetown University. Roz earned a PhD from the Catholic University of America. Roz is motivated to complete her memoirs so that her 3 children, their spouses, her nieces, and 11 grandchildren will have them to read.
Very good.
And with that, and I'll just point, Roz, will you raise your hand so folks can know who you are? And we'll have her stand to give her a round of applause after you hear her wonderful story. So with that, I'm going to read Roz Feldman's story, Growing Up in the Bronx. Unfortunately, I can't do the Bronx accent that my mom would have been able to do. I grew up in the Bronx after the Depression, during World War II and the post-war years. I lived with my parents, my younger sister Barbara, and my Aunt Anna in a 2-bedroom apartment on West Farms Road in South Bronx. The building was originally well-maintained, marked by a consistent shine on the brass handrails along steps into the lobby. My parents took us on outings when Barbara and I didn't have school and my dad was off from work. Depending on the season, we ice skated on the Crotona Park Lake, visited the Bronx Zoo, the Botanical Gardens, or toured the Egyptian collection at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. During summers, we belonged to the Castle Hill Swim Club, where we swam, played shuffleboard, ping pong, tennis, and we sunbathed. My father had been a lifeguard there previously, and Castle Hill was where my parents met. On warm days, moms in our building dragged wooden folding chairs down flights of stairs from their apartments to form a circle on the sidewalk in the front of our building. None of the moms were employed, which was typical for the 1940s, when many married women with children considered homemaking their full-time occupation. While the moms knitted, talked, and laughed, their children played. Boys went around the corner to Vice Avenue to the Play Street, which was closed off from cars on each end of the block by the local police department. The boys played stickball or marbles, while girls stayed on West Farms Road playing potsy, jacks, roller skating, or jump rope. We gathered girls from the building next door to have enough people to play hide and seek. On the way, we passed the ground floor window of a Gold Star mother who displayed a photo of her son. He was killed while serving in the Navy during the war. Every time I passed that window, I wiped tears from my face. I attended public school 66, PS 66 Elementary, 5 blocks from our apartment. I walked home for lunch except when it rained or snowed, when I brown bagged my lunch. From 7th to 9th grade, I attended Herman Ritter Junior High School, PS 98. I was a student in a program called the SPs, or Special Program, which condensed 4 years of 9th through 12th grade studies into 3. Nowadays, such programs are called advanced placement or gifted and talented programs. I perceived fellow SP students who came from Parkchester, a more affluent neighborhood, as geniuses. As a teenager, I attended James Monroe High School, the school from which my mother and her 4 siblings had graduated. At Monroe, I had a group of girlfriends. Many of us were in the same Hebrew foreign language class. After World War II and the founding of Israel, Hebrew was added to foreign languages taught in New York City publics. Our teacher, Dr. Blumberg, was strict with the boys, most of whom attended Hebrew school and were blasé about paying attention in class. I was familiar with the Hebrew alphabet, having taken Yiddish lessons at the Workmen's Circle Shul. I went with my girlfriends from Hebrew class to meetings of a Zionist youth organization, and we met at each other's houses to socialize. Once on my birthday, they surprised me during school lunchtime by presenting me with a bright pink fuchsia sweater, which I thought was the most beautiful sweater I had ever seen. As I grew older, the building my family lived in and the neighborhood deteriorated. I was totally embarrassed when a visiting cousin, eating lunch in the kitchen with me, became unhinged when she spotted a cockroach crawling up the wall near her elbow. The superintendent stopped cleaning the hallways. Holes in walls along the stairways were ignored, and periodic painting and renewal of the building stopped. The building had been sold by the longtime landlord to a group of Wall Street investors. 2 boys I dated asked, "How can you live here?" It became risky being outside alone. Once, on my way home, when I disembarked the Westchester Avenue bus, I had to run for 2 city blocks to get away from a man chasing me. Often descending the steep staircase at the Simpson Street subway station, I would see men below standing along the other side of the handrail, looking up to see the women's dresses beneath. Prostitutes worked in an apartment building kitty corner from ours. Men going to and from that building made crude comments as I passed on my way home. The environment and people suffered. Trees were cut down, litter lined the streets. Often, while looking through our living room window facing Vice Avenue, I saw young women enter a brownstone building housing a physician's office. Later, I saw them waiting for taxis. The physician had lost his license and was performing illegal abortions. Sadness and decay prevailed. My Aunt Anna, who had shared a room with me, married a kind, loving, returning GI and moved to Manhattan. My parents had been on a waiting list for many years for apartments that had not yet been built in the North Bronx. In 1958, we moved to one of those apartments on Cannon Place near Van Cortlandt Park. It was an easy, joyful transition, moving from a neglected tenement to a sparkling co-op. My sister and I shared a bedroom and quickly adjusted to hearing the wind whistling against our 7th-story window. My outgoing mother organized a mahjong game and became friendly with neighbors. I relish the cleanliness, greenery, and safety of our new neighborhood. During the 18 busy months I lived there, I completed my bachelor's degree, worked as a public health nurse, and married. When my husband Al received a fellowship from the University of Chicago Physics Department, we moved there and I worked as a school nurse. We never lived in an unsafe neighborhood again, and we raised our 3 children in homes where we didn't have to worry about their safety.
Very good.
Wallace, will you stand? Thank you, Roz. Thank you for that beautiful story and for letting me read it. All right. Next up, we've got Anusha Fernando Darmasina. For Anusha, writing was a hobby while she worked for the Board of Governors at the Federal Reserve and raised a family. Sometimes she writes poetry. Sometimes she writes about the moon, the stars, and butterflies that amaze her. Often, her writings are inspired by life moments that teach her a lesson or two. Recently, she has been documenting her ancestry for her family. Anusha is from Sri Lanka and lives in Rockville, Maryland, and now reading her story, Best Day Ever, Expect Great Things, I give you Anusha.
Thank you.
I want to thank Laura for being a fabulous teacher, inspiring me. The last teacher. I want to thank my friend Calvin and Becky for attending this event today because it's important to me and it's nice to see this room full of people who are interested in hearing all our lovely stories. So, best day ever. Expect great things. It was March 2013, that time of year when college applications reveal decisions. And it was late in the evening. The room was fairly dark and the heavy wooden door was tightly shut. I was still at work at the Federal Reserve preparing notes and data analysis for a meeting the next day. The phone rang. I was startled. I answered. From the voice I recognized, it was my high school son, Prashant. A gentle soul, unassuming and generally calm. The quiet voice said, "Amma, are you going to be late coming home tonight?" I responded, "Is it something urgent?" He hesitated and said, "I just wanted to let you know where I got into college." There was silence. He continued in his soft voice, "I got into USC and Berkeley." I congratulated him and told him I would finish up my notes for the meeting and come home soon. I felt sad. I was unable to look into his eyes while hearing him or feel his excitement. After all, I was the immigrant who came to America with a few bucks, and this was big news. I literally fell down on my knees asking the universe to help me to make better decisions so that the next call of significance wouldn't be as devastating. I was pleading to be more aware of priorities especially with my mother in a nursing home in Maryland. I knew then that if I continued to work late hours like this, the next call would be from the nursing home to say, Mrs. Damasceno, we are sorry to let you know your mom passed away. This thought brought shivers to my spine and shook me up even more. My tears reminded me that I had forgotten my priorities. I was not ready when the universe gifted that proud moment to me. I remember quickly finding college logos and hanging them up on the front of my office door and slamming it shut. I was so frustrated and angry, but was quickly coming to terms with the day of reckoning. I missed the chance to experience the face-to-face news of a big achievement. By the time I got home, it was too late. There was no hug. There was no celebration. The moment was lost. I knew I had to make changes with my work life and was ready to do so. The summer of 2013 quickly came to an end as we flew cross-country from Maryland to San Francisco. The universe was blessing this new journey for Prashant as he began his education in computer science. And there were signs of what was ahead for him. It was the airplane napkin. It stated, "Best day ever, expect great things." Soon after receiving the news of Prashant's admission to Berkeley, I was blessed with the answer to my prayer of tears when I was awarded an opportunity that swept me off my feet at work. I was offered the best job at the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve. It took me through to June 2016 when I retired. I felt that the universe had planned to send me home to spend time with Mom. As time rolled on, Prashant graduated in 2017 to the amazing sounds ringing from the Berkeley Sato Tower, quickly making him a Berkeley alum. He was photographed with my mom. I was grateful that I had changed jobs and retired, which gave me more precious time with my mother. We talked about ancestry and took photos of our various outings and moments at home. I had no regrets when the heavens welcomed her with angelic music to walk on streets paved with gold in 2018. It was then that I realized that the 2013 shake-up call and prayer on my knees was no accident. It was a part of the master plan. It's been a few years since her passing and life's rude awakening of sorts. Truly appreciating my essential circle of friends. We root for one another with loving kindness and are there for one another when we have a fault. We live in a complicated world that lacks loving kindness, and it's hard to find that genuine act of love. It is hard to explore new ways of thinking. There's so much to teach the next generation about how to understand the value of friendships and what they mean. Learning to meditate requires space and quiet time to reflect on life's journeys while correcting our mistakes. I am grateful I was able to do so when I received the message to place my family as a priority over work. It is my hope that others discover what I discovered, that they are ready and humble when the universe talks to them. I try to live life so that when my end comes, people might remember the kindness I extended to make their life's journey a bit lighter, a bit kinder, and a bit more blessed.
Thank you very much.
And guess what? Today is November 13th. They call it World Kindness Day.
Yes, I mean, that's good.
Thank you, Anusha.
Lovely
Thank you
day.
so much. Beautiful.
Lovely.
Oh my goodness. See just the range of stories that came out of this class, the range of experience we get to hear. So I'm going to ask a big favor of all of you. We're going to run about 10 minutes over. So I am hoping that all of you will be able to stay. We have 2 killer storytellers to come. So please, if you will, just hold your seats for 10 extra minutes after the usual 2 o'clock ending. And with that, I'd like to bring up Al Feldman, who is a retired physicist with more than 100 scientific publications. He now designs art quilts using computer software and makes quilts on a computerized quilting machine. Al's quilts have been exhibited at national quilt shows and have won several awards. He published an article titled Making Waves in Quilting Arts magazine, which describes some of his quilts and how they are made. And with that, I give you Al Feldman reading his story, An Unfortunate Incident.
During the 1940s, I attended Public School 16, commonly known as PS 16, from 1st through 8th grade. The school was located in the Williamsburg neighborhood of Brooklyn on Wilson Street, taking up nearly one side of a very long block. Anyone familiar with my part of Williamsburg would know that many of the streets were named after the signers of the Declaration of Independence. The section of Williamsburg in which I lived was a mostly Jewish neighborhood with many synagogues, and this is still the case. When I attended public schools PS 16, the school consisted of 2 buildings, one which predated the Civil War. This older building was used by children in kindergarten through 5th grade. Newspapers would report about this top building from time to time because due to its age, some of the facilities were rather archaic. For example, we had to put on coats and go outdoors to use the bathrooms.
Oh my
Outhouse.
Well, the bathrooms were inside, but we had to go out to get to them. The other building was much newer and larger than the first, and was 4 stories tall. It was used by children in grades 6 through 8. In the newer building, all the floors were accessed with staircases that had landings between floors, and each staircase was separated from an adjacent one by a wall of panels made of reinforced glass. It was on one of these staircases that my unfortunate incident occurred. In the 7th grade, I had been chosen to be an AAA crossing guard. Crossing guard programs in the city were sponsored by the American Automobile Association. Each guard was given a white belt with a diagonal strap that crossed one shoulder and had a metal badge with AAA embossed on it, which was pinned to the shoulder strap. Guards were assigned posts across the streets at the ends of the school. We were to ensure that incoming students crossed the street safely by obeying the traffic lights. My position was at the intersection of Wilson Street and Bedford Avenue. After all these other students had entered the school, the crossing guards would leave their posts to go inside the school to their homerooms. One of the other crossing guards was a boy named Richard. He often accompanied me back to school after guard duty. Richard had a reputation as a troublemaker who misbehaved in class. He had never been in any of my classes, so I had never witnessed any of this behavior myself. One day, while we were in the middle of the flight of stairs between the first and second floor, Richard decided to grab me and somehow swing me around and over his shoulder. I had complete feeling of helplessness because there was nothing I was able to do to control what happened next. As a result, the heel of one of my shoes smashed into a glass panel, which cracked with a loud bang. Luckily, I was not hurt, and Richard wasn't either. But the noise attracted the attention of the school principal, whose office was on the second floor near the stairwell. I never had any previous interactions with the principal, Mr. Goldman. He was a pleasant, quiet man with a slight limp. Upon hearing the noise, he came out of his office to investigate what had happened. Seeing us, he ordered us into his office. I cannot recall what he said to us, but being the quiet person he was, I don't think it was very much. We didn't say much either. However, as a result, we were both removed from our positions as crossing guards, even though Richard was to blame. This completely humiliated me because it had been an honor to be chosen as a crossing guard. Fortunately, this incident did not have any further consequences, as I was later selected to be the valedictorian at the 8th grade graduation. I do not know what happened to Richard. I don't think he was a bad person. He was just a mischievous one. As for the cracked glass panel, it may still be there today. And as for the school, an addition was constructed there during my final year there, and subsequently the pre-Civil War section of the school was demolished and replaced. Many years ago, while passing through my old neighborhood, I saw the building that replaced the old one, the one that I attended. It had neither the character nor the charm of the old building.
Keep it running while she's on video too.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Al. Wonderful to hear you. So our final presenter is going to join us.
What happened to the principal?
What happened to the principal? Good question. What happened to the principal, Al?
I don't know.
He retired.
So, friends, I'll just remind you that if you are interested in participating in this class next March, to be sure to sign that sheet there. But for our final reader, unfortunately, she could not be with us in person, but we made a video of her, so you will get to hear Gladys in the recording that we made of her story. Gladys Louvenia Wineglass Boyd was born and raised in Georgetown, South Carolina. She is retired and does volunteer work in her community. Gladys enjoys writing and traveling. She earned a diploma from Freedman's Hospital School of Nursing, 1961, BSN from Howard University, Washington, D.C., 1984, and MSHS End-of-Life Care from George Washington University. She is an ordained deacon of People's Congregational United Church of Washington, D.C. And now, reading her story with us virtually is Gladys Boyd reading her story, A Day at the Farm. Almost there. Let's see.
Afternoon. My story is entitled A Day at the Farm. It was a bright, sunny Sunday afternoon with several puffs of white clouds that varied in shape, dangling from a pale blue sky. Kate, our trusty, high-spirited chestnut brown mule trotted along Highway 521, called the Andrews Highway by the locals. During the late 1940s in Georgetown, South Carolina, a horse or mule pulling a wagon or carriage was a common mode of transportation for country folk. Kate, her dark brown mane glistening in the sunlight, seemed to effortlessly pull our rickety, old, unpainted wooden wagon along, eagerly listening for and obeying the commands of my father to giddy up and whoa. Her matching long brown tail occasionally brushed off any flying insect that dared to light on her beautiful spotless coat. Kate seemed just as eager to reach my Uncle Ed and Aunt Ethel's farm as we were. Although it was only 7 miles from our home, it seemed to take forever to reach the exit where we would turn off the main highway onto a narrow, winding, dusty dirt road that would eventually end in the front yard of the farmhouse. Visiting Uncle Ed and Aunt Ethel's home was always a special treat for all of us. My mom and dad, Johnny and Alberta, my 2 older brothers, Zeke and Henry, our younger sister, Isola, and me. While it was a treacherous ride, the 4 children were excited and found it most amusing. We laughed gleefully and held on tightly to our seats to keep from falling off as Kate, under Dad's skillful guidance, pulled the wagon over numerous bumps in the road, causing the wagon to tilt from side to side and bounce up and down. We swayed side to side, backwards and forward, still laughing. We knew we had arrived when we passed the tobacco barn on the left, with the pleasant smell of tobacco curing and smoke billowing from the pipes atop the roof. Straight ahead was a small farmhouse, almost engulfed by a 20-acre farm, including a tobacco field on the left and a cotton field on the right. Behind the farmhouse's barnyard, one could view long rows of corn, a vast array of vegetables, and a large grape arbor. Following my dad's prompts, Kate obediently pulled the wagon around to the rear of the house. Dad unhitched the wagon and loosely tied the reins of her headgear to a tall, sturdy pecan tree in the backyard. The children could hardly wait to scamper off the back of the wagon and race to the pump in the backyard to enjoy a drink of cool water. Zeke and Henry worked together to prime the pump. Henry poured water slowly from a quart jar into an opening on top of the pump. Zeke pulled up and pressed down on the pump's long handle until water flowed out and was running cool. We took turns drinking from a communal tin cup until our thirst was quenched after the long journey. Water was pumped into a bucket and placed in front of Kate. She promptly lowered her head and eagerly drank to quench her thirst as well. After all, she had done strenuous work, pulling the wagon with all the passengers aboard to get us safely to the farm. Suddenly, the familiar smell of delicious food drifting from the kitchen filled the air. And Ethel, wearing an apron tied around her waist, had opened the back door. And Ethel could make anything produced on the farm taste very good. As usual, she greeted us warmly and welcomed us in. As we entered the kitchen, the aromas became more pronounced. One could distinguish the familiar smell of golden brown fried chicken, smoked fatback meat, or smoked pork neck bones, seasoning the fresh green butter beans, to which ground black pepper and a few whole okras were added to enhance the taste. One could also smell freshly baked cornbread and the aroma of sweet potato pies. A pot of steamed rice simmered on the back of the wood-burning stove. Although Aunt Ethel made everything look, smell, and taste yummy, her sweet potato pies were rich, tasty, and simply beyond delicious. Aunt Ethel and Mom spooned up food on her special blue willow plates for each of us. Armed with a fork, each of us sat on one of the mismatched chairs and ate from plates balanced on our laps. Uncle Ed and Aunt Ethel never knew when we might visit, for there were no telephones. However, Aunt Ethel always prepared more than enough food. Not only did they serve us an appetizing, hearty meal, they also gave us baskets and burlap bags containing a variety of products grown on the farm to take home with us. We had a very pleasant visit, eating, drinking, and socializing. The children enjoyed playing in the backyard, gathering pecans that had fallen from the tree, and picking and eating grapes from the grape arbor. Finally, Dad strapped Kate's headgear on and hitched up the wagon. We climbed up on the wagon and started the long trip home after a wonderful day at the farm.
Wow.
See, I told you it was worth staying for another 10 minutes.
Yep.
Thank you all so much. Again, Gladys Boyd, let's give her another round of applause. It's a beautiful story. So, in just a little over an hour, you have had a chance to sample cuisines from a kitchen in Brooklyn, an Italian meal. You've had a Filipino meal. You've had a meal fresh cooked off the farm in South Carolina. You've been introduced to people's educational backgrounds, their homes, their families. All these things came out in the beautiful stories that these students, that I had the real privilege to work with these students this semester. And it's just a joy to get to share this work with all of you. Stories come alive in the listening. They come alive when you read them. So our stories don't live in a vacuum. They're stories that need to be told. And I truly encourage you to take this if you are so inclined. If you've been holding back on writing your own story, jot something down. Read it to one of your family members or a friend, just like we've been doing in this class. And again, please feel free to sign up. It's been a pleasure to have you all with us today, and thank you. And thanks again to Holiday Park.
I just wanted, on behalf of my classmates, Anusha, Dr. Alice, Al, and Ross Fredman, and John, thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you all so much. I'm not going to open it in front of everybody.